I am super excited today to be joined by Pete Buttigieg, the former Secretary of Transportation. It's so great to be here with you. So great to be on Substack Live. I do want to, something I do with a lot of guests is I hate talking about just all the headlines. I want to learn more about you as a person. And I kind of want to get started. You've been a mayor, you've been a presidential candidate once, maybe a second time soon. You have been a Secretary of Transportation. Who is Pete Buttigieg today?
Well, today I'm mostly a dad, so I think that's the number one thing that my time and energy goes to, and I'm really glad for the things that come with stepping away from public office. I love public service, but I also really love just being able to be more present with the kids. So, Jess and I have twins; they're about to turn 4. They keep asking about their birthday literally every single day. Being the one who's dropping them off at school and picking them up at camp has been really great. Of course, I'm politically active too. You'll see me from time to time doing interviews like this or writing a little bit, but really trying to take advantage of a chance to be a little more human than what's possible when you're in office, or certainly when you're running for office.
Well, I got to ask you, how has it felt being kind of on the outside looking in? We heard former Vice President Kamala Harris recently say that the system is broken and that she thought she could do more on the outside versus running for governor again. How has it felt for you? Do you feel similarly? Do you feel like the system is currently broken and that your voice is more needed right now on the outside?
Well, I think there are a ton of problems with our system. There always have been, and you can work on them from the inside, and you can work on them from the outside. When I was a mayor, I was very skeptical of Washington and some of the frustrations of the federal system. Then I found myself working in that federal system as Secretary of Transportation, and we were able to get a lot done. But in many ways, I felt even more frustrated after seeing the system up close and working within it. I mean, there's no question that there are a whole set of things that we have inherited in our political structures, in our economy, in the way we do business as a country that are incredibly out of date. They might have made sense 30, 50, 70 years ago, but they don't make sense anymore. And I think that has caught up to us in a big way that really goes beyond left versus right disagreements, although those disagreements are important. And there's a real future versus past question that I think is being forced on us, partly by the craziness of our politics, but also by developments like artificial intelligence that are going to make this one of the most fast changing periods that any generation of Americans has ever lived through.
Well, I want to take you back to kind of even before you ran for mayor the first time, just to introduce yourself a little bit more on a personal level to folks who don't know your story. I guess why did you even decide to run for office in the first place? Because that to a lot of people is a scary concept. And a lot of
Yep.
people are like, I would never put myself out there in that regard. So why run?
Yeah, it was scary for me too. I grew up in a family that cared a lot about politics and a lot about the news. We weren't politically connected. I don't remember ever meeting an elected official when I was growing up, but we were politically aware in different ways. My father immigrated to this country in the '70s from Malta. He came here to get an education and then became an American citizen. My mother had a very different background. Her dad was in the army. She moved around the country as a kid, but both of them had this deep sense that you should pay attention to what's going on around you, that the decisions that are being made in Washington matter to all of us. And so I just grew up soaking that up. The TV was always tuned to the news. The dinner table talk was always about what was happening. And then I went to college. I had a chance to start seeing political figures speak. I began to realize that these people that I had watched on the news and sometimes looked up to were human beings,
Right.
which on one hand is an obvious fact, and on the other hand, I think sometimes is hard to believe until you see people up close. And so I had always cared about who was in office, but never would have guessed that I'd wind up running for office the way I did. What happened was I was in my 20s. I was working as a management consultant, and the state treasurer of Indiana, for very political reasons, tried to stop the Obama administration from saving the auto industry.
Mm.
And it's a long story how that came about. But the other thing I should mention about how I grew up was I grew up in a community in northern Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, whose whole story was dominated by what had happened in the auto industry. We had been home to a major automaker, Studebaker. Studebaker went out of business 20 years before I was born, but that fact was still the most important thing about our city when I was growing up there. And there were collapsing factories everywhere, just even on the road going to school. So I knew what it meant when a community had its economy destroyed. And I saw that that might happen to another set of communities because of these actions that the
Mm,
state treasurer of Indiana, which is not somebody most people, even in Indiana, had ever heard
right.
of, was doing. I said, "Who's going to run against this guy?" And the answer was nobody. Nobody's really lining up to run against a Republican in Indiana in 2010 for a statewide office that nobody had heard of. And I decided to step up and do it. And I quit my job and I traveled the state and I got clobbered. I lost like 60-40. Nobody'd heard of me either. But I learned that the only way to do something like that is to do it. And I learned the process of running for office. So then a little bit later, when our hometown was trying to figure out what its future was going to be like, and the longest serving mayor in the history of our city, after about 15 years, said he was retiring, and everybody was saying where we headed next, I thought, maybe a different generation has something different to
Mm.
offer in terms of where the city is headed, and surprised a lot of people, including partly myself, by running and winning.
Do you see parallels in kind of the auto industry today with the economic policy from the administration compared to what you saw 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. In one very direct way, and then one more indirect way. The direct way is I see a lot of workers being hurt by what's happening right now. You look at what's going on with the tariffs. You look at
Right.
all this chaos happening in our supply chains, and we're seeing a lot of small businesses and a lot of manufacturing impacted by that. The bigger picture, though, is I think that as somebody who remembers what it was like in our part of the Midwest
Mhm.
when a lot of trade and automation came through in the 90s and early 2000s and really created enormous problems, social as well as economic problems for us. I see something happening on a much bigger scale with artificial intelligence, and I think it's
Mm.
happening to more people and more quickly, or it's about to be,
Right.
than even what happened to us in the industrial Midwest. And I think this time we have a chance not to repeat some of the mistakes that were made that impacted places like where I grew up. And I think I just don't see this administration thinking very much about that. And frankly, I don't see my party thinking about that nearly enough either.
Well, yeah, I gotta ask you about that because I think AI is somewhat of a polarizing topic. I mean, there's issues with AI, but I think it's coming whether we like it or not. What's your take on the use of artificial intelligence, whether in the auto industry or just generally elsewhere? Because for me, I think it's you get on board at this point or you're gonna kind of be left behind because it's going and it's coming whether we like it or not.
I think that's exactly right. I don't think it makes sense for our spectrum on AI to be kind of for or against. It's like
Yes.
trying to be for or against the internet. It's here, it's growing, it's happening. The question is how we manage it. How do we make sure it's developed in a way that is safe? How do we make sure it develops in a way that really complements human beings? Because it's just a fundamentally different concept if you're using AI to replace a human being than if you're using AI to make human beings more productive and more effective. But to be clear, either way, it's going to change millions of jobs in this
Right.
country. And that's the part I think we really need to do more to get on top of, to understand, okay, if millions of entry level jobs are about to either change or just not be there. And I'm talking about in maybe 3 years, 5 years. I mean, this is not a distant prediction. If there's even a decent chance of that happening, then we've got to be acting now to help make sure that people can have secure income, to make sure that our benefits are set up. So if you're going to be changing jobs a lot, which certainly even
Yeah.
my generation changes jobs more than my parents' generation did, the next generation even more so. What are we doing to make it easier to navigate those kinds of things, and a whole bunch of other questions, not just economic questions, but even questions about belonging
Mm.
and where you fit in society that we as a country have gotten way too absorbed in our profession, our job as our source of identity. Um, it's especially true for
Right.
white collar workers, and white collar workers are probably going to be the first to experience this wave of automation. So these are the kinds of things I want to see policy and politicians and the Democratic Party in particular doing a better job of handling.
Well, I gotta ask you, okay, so you served as mayor for 2 terms, and then you ran for DNC chairman actually back in 2017. Looking back at the chairmanship run then, how do you see our party evolve over the next 8 years to now 2025? It's been 8 years since then. Everything you ran on then, do you think the party kind of adopted over the next 8 years? I mean, where do you see the party going today?
So, yes and no. I mean, certainly some things I was talking about then we're seeing a lot of now. So the first thing I talked about when I ran for chair of the Democratic Party was that we should have more to say about freedom. We talked about freedom, families, fairness, and the future. And freedom was a thing that was associated with conservatives, with libertarians, usually when they were arguing against taxes or any kind of government regulation. Um, but I thought that we should be talking about freedom more, both freedom from and freedom to. That if you have good healthcare, for example, then you have more freedom to start a small business or make different choices in life than if you're stuck without healthcare or you would lose your healthcare if you change jobs. So the ways of talking about freedom, I think that did get picked up. I mean,
Mhm.
Kamala Harris, the nominee last year, was talking about freedom all the time.
Right,
It was literally her walk-on song, right? It was Beyonce's freedom.
right.
Um, in other ways, I think that the party is still struggling, and there's some of the things that I tried to put a focus on even back then when I was an unknown mayor trying to change the conversation in the DNC. I think we need to pay more attention to what's going on locally and not just Washington. And we need to pay more attention to places like the industrial Midwest where I grew up and where I served. And I think we need to do a better job of calling people into our coalition. I think a lot of people would be ready to listen to us, especially now with all of the ways that Trump has insulted his own supporters, but not if it seems like we're lining up to insult them in the exact same way.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, so you ran for DNC chair, you ran for president, you served in President Biden's cabinet. Now you're a private citizen. In your opinion today, what is the one issue, the most important issue impacting Americans right now?
It's hard to pick one, but one that I'll mention that I'm just even more attuned to right now is making it easier to be a parent. And,
Mm,
that's everything from affordability, making it easier to buy a home, which has become more and more out of reach, especially for anybody kind of my age or younger than I am. But also policies that every other country has, like paid leave, to make it easier to become a parent. And I don't think this should be very partisan. It's become partisan. We tried to do paid leave in the last administration. The Republicans shut it down. But if you ask Americans, just like everyday Americans, not maybe not
right.
Congress, most Americans who think of themselves as conservative want to see these pro-family policies too. And we should be doing a lot more as a country to deliver on that and just make it easier to afford to be a parent and to go about being a parent.
Do you feel like you becoming a parent to twins has kind of changed your mindset on that policy? And if
Yeah,
so,
no
how?
question. No question. I mean, I cared about these policy issues, on paper.
Yeah.
But when you see, even the phenomenal advantages and resources that I felt that Chasten and I had as we became parents, we had relatives who lived close by. We had health insurance. We had leave, and all those things going for us. And it was still so challenging to become parents. And you look at what people are up against when they don't have that. And right now, people who are going to lose their access to Medicaid, for example, as a result of the Trump budget, or any number of other things that make it harder. And I just feel it in a whole different way now that I know what it's like to scramble to find childcare when one of your kids is sick and both parents need to be at work.
So I do want to talk about some of the issues facing kind of Americans today, and I want to start by talking about some criticism you actually received over the past couple of weeks regarding trans athletes in sports. You received some pushback within the Democratic Party about your answer when asked about whether uh, uh, essentially trans athletes should be playing in women's sports, and you said that it was a concept of it. Ultimately, it was up to fairness, a concept of fairness, but that it's an issue that should be dealt with compassion. What's your response to folks who say that this you kind of played into a wedge issue for Republicans, that this isn't an issue impacting the overwhelming majority of Americans, and it's one that ultimately kind of leaves trans Americans behind?
Well, again, I think we do need to lead with compassion on this, and we need to take everybody seriously. I see this issue being used to divide. I see it being used to hurt people. It's especially hurtful for trans people and people with transgender members of their family. who witness themselves or people they love being used as a political football. And look, there have always been attempts in politics to get ahead by demonizing or dismissing entire groups of people. And I see that that's one response, certainly the one that comes from this administration and from the right, towards a lot of people who are just trying to go about their lives. We're talking about one of the smallest, as well as one of the most vulnerable minorities in this country and in the world. I think in order to bring people together on this, we also have to take everybody seriously.
Mm.
And parents who have questions or people who wonder what this means, if this comes up, for example, in the context of a sports league that they or a family member is playing in, it's extremely rare. But when it happens, they're going to have questions about how to make sure that that's fair. And we should take those questions seriously and face those together. And above all, and this is what I said, expect that those questions should be handled by communities and by sports leagues and not by politicians.
I do also want to ask you about tariffs and how they're impacting kind of your community in the Midwest. Have you seen the impacts of tariffs already? Have you spoken to small business owners? And what are your opinions on the current administration's tariffs policy? Are you opposed blanket against tariffs? Are you for some tariffs? What does that look like?
Look, there are situations where tariffs can be an important economic tool, and presidents from both parties have used that tool. But you have to have a strategy and you have to know who you're trying to support. And instead, what we see here is chaos. There's no coherent strategy other than to maximize the power, the personal power of the president. He wants countries and companies and industries coming to him one by one to get on his good side, to get either let out of tariffs or strike some deal. It's not about our economy. It's about power. It's about his
Mm.
power. And that's not healthy. And yes, I have talked to businesses. Business owners come up to me just when I was at breakfast, and there was a small business across the way. It's a little shop. They said we're not sure how to do our orders because we don't know what the tariffs are going to be because it
Right.
keeps changing. So this is having like very real direct effects. Companies are now saying the prices are starting to increase as a result of the tariffs that have gone in. So, there's a period where they could hold out on old inventory and you didn't see it too much when you were shopping. That's changing. It's changing before our eyes right now. And the strangest or worst thing about it is that everybody, left, right, and center, agreed that the biggest problem in our economy at the beginning of this year was affordability.
Right.
And inflation had come down, but it was still too high. And the big question is how to lower prices. Trump said he was going to lower prices on day one. Whatever you think about their pros or cons, tariffs directly increase prices. They are a tax that you pay, that I pay at the store anytime we buy something that's subject to those tariffs. And there's just no logic to having your leading economic policy being something to increase prices at a time when the most important thing we should be doing with our economy is to get prices down.
I got to ask you a couple more questions before I let you go. The first is, what's something right now? I mean, there's so much doom and gloom in our country, there's so much divisiveness. What's something that's giving you hope right now?
Well, certainly seeing people meeting the politics of fear with the politics of courage. We see it in the businesses and universities and individuals who have stood up to bullying by this administration. I think there's an example of it right now with Texas Democrats who have left the
Mhm.
state rather than allow a nakedly partisan power grab to take place. They're trying to redraw the lines because the Republicans know they're probably going to lose the House if they don't change the rules somehow because their policies are so unpopular. These Texas Democrats are standing up to that, and they're being threatened with everything from removal to arrest to fines, and they're standing up to that, and I think that's having an effect. The other thing that gives me hope is that even though we're going through a very ugly period where so many things, so many institutions and parts of our government and other things in our society are being destroyed, it does mean that in the future there will be a chance to build them on new and better terms.
Mhm.
And even though I'm against them being destroyed, I'm also against putting them back just the way they were. I actually think there's a huge opportunity for the generations that are now living, if we can overcome this political moment, to be building new things and new ways of doing business, everything from our politics to our economy to our communities, at a level that we haven't experienced since long before you or I were born.
Right. And final question for you. There are Republicans in this chat, there are independents, there are people who aren't just on the left, and I pride on my platform on being more nonpartisan. What's your message to Republicans today who say, you know what, I don't have a home. I feel abandoned by my party. It's kind of shifted from where it was in 2012 and 2008. It's not the party that Reagan once ran. What's your message to those folks?
I think my message is that we want to be in coalition with you. We're not going to agree on everything, but we probably agree on more than not. And I think right now we've got an administration that has left a lot of its supporters homeless. For example, a lot of people I know who are conservative or libertarian, one of the biggest things they worried about was government overreach.
Mm,
So much so that we disagree with this, but they would think that, the Clean Air Act might have been government overreach. Well, right now, if you're a libertarian or you're a freedom-loving conservative, this is your Super Bowl. We've
right.
literally got federal agents picking people up off the streets, sometimes because of something they wrote in a newspaper. We've got the government threatening broadcasters who broadcast content that criticizes the government. Conservatives, I think, they used to talk about those things when we were arguing over beers in college, and I'd say that sort of thing is it's a fever dream. That sort of thing's not going to happen. Well, now I admit it is happening, but it's happening under a president who is trying to command the loyalty of conservatives. I think conservatives and libertarians can find common cause right now in the defense of freedom, and then we can go back to arguing about tax policy and other things where we might have different ideas.
Well, Pete Buttigieg, it's so great to be here with you. Thank you for hopping on. And I know a lot of people are excited to kind of continue hearing your voice in the next several months, but in the years to come. So looking forward to having more conversations soon.
Likewise, great speaking with you.
Take
Thanks.
care.